Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. In an unusual role, I'm Joe Meade, and Sean Vowells is with me. We are discussing the entirety of the NCAA tournament, probably more so first weekend focus. We're going to try to stay out of the greater narratives that we think will happen. And obviously, we can get into those more next week and next weekend. But Sean, we're going to start off with the South region here, kind of a region that a lot of people are having a hard time picking. A lot of people really liked Florida for the second half of the year, kind of tumbled there to Vanderbilt. It is their region, and then you have Houston in that region as well, who, according to CBS Sports, fourth best championship odds, which is weird because the other top three are the other one seed. So I'm going to dive right into this, Sean. Is this Florida's region to lose, or is there other factors at play here?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it is their their pod slash if you take the top half of the bracket, which is the left side of the graphic that I've set up here, I think it's that to lose. But I actually think if we get this one and versus two Elite Eight matchup that the chalk would suggest, um, I would say no. Like I think they definitely have the toughest two seed. This was I think believe Houston was number 6 on the seed list, and Florida was number 4. But no, I think it would be very surprising if they don't get to the Elite Eight, but they might have the toughest two seed on the other side.
I agree, Sean. And the other thing I'll ask is, a lot of people point out 4-5 matchups. We're going to talk about at least a few as we go through this. Kind of Vanderbilt is relevant because they just beat the you know what out of Florida. And Nebraska is a very popular upset pick. I think it's a great story. And I do think, just based on what we know about Big Ten basketball, they're a solid team. But not a lot of people necessarily picking Florida to get upset before that Elite Eight.
Yeah, I do think that would be. And now it's a little bit easier to say, like you said, because we saw it 3 days ago when we're recording this that Vanderbilt beat them by double digits by a lot. But um, yeah, I do think that was sort of that won't happen again if they meet again. I don't think so. Vanderbilt is a very streaky up and down team. I think we'll get into how they potentially match up against Nebraska in a round of 32 matchup if they both win. But Joe, let's go through the matchups.
Yeah, Sean. First off, Florida, we don't know who they're playing quite yet. I think the safe assumption is they'll win that without much difficulty. This Clemson Iowa game, Sean, we talked about in a nutshell. This is a very hard matchup to pick because it's two very similar styles. Why did you pick who you picked as you did in the last episode, and what's dictating that?
I think we know a lot, Joe, about Iowa from watching them numerous times this year. I am picking the Hawkeyes to win this game. If you haven't seen Clemson, it's literally Iowa in orange jerseys. They do a lot of things similar. They don't have any common opponents from what I could tell in my brief, perusing of their schedule. But this is Clemson, 69th in offense, 20th in defense. They defensive rebound really well. They don't really crash the glass that much on offense. They defend the two pretty well, under 50%. So they do a lot of things well. Nothing truly elite. They don't score it at a very high rate, like I said. I just think that Iowa has the best player on the court, and I don't think this is going to be a game that there's going to be much separation. You know it. It's definitely first to 60 in my mind, and Joe, it might even be first to 50. I think this will be the lowest scoring game of the first round, barring like one of the 16 seeds putting up like 20 points or something. But yeah, this is a really tough one to pick because both these teams are very similar.
Absolutely. Sean, I'm going to go down here. Vanderbilt playing McNeese, Nebraska playing Troy. I know a lot of people are picking one of these as an upset. And we already talked about the streaky nature of Vanderbilt. Nebraska, you could argue of late has been streaky. Which one of these do you think, is there any upset potential in these? And if there is one, which one catches your eye the most?
Yeah, it's a very difficult one to see going the way of the lower seed, Joe. I do think that to my knowledge, both these teams were the last seeded teams on their line. Definitely Troy was. McNeese may have been the third 12, but this is not the McNeese team that we saw last year with Will Wade and a couple of players who now play for NC State. They had a good succession plan in there, but they didn't really walk through the Southland like they did last year. They're still a really good team, 28-5, 19-3 in the league. They are number one in forcing turnovers in Division One, 24.6%. That's not something that Vanderbilt really does. That they take care of the ball. They're pretty efficient offensively. Um, they block 15.8%. They're fourth in block rate. Again, I don't think that'll translate to a team of better size. And they have played two power conference teams to my knowledge here, Joe. South Carolina, a 12-point loss on the road, and then they went to your Michigan Wolverines on December 29th and lost 112-71. Talk about a team that likes to turn the ball over. In your Michigan Wolverines wasn't a problem that day against McNeese. So I think Vanderbilt, if they're anywhere close to as sharp as they were in the SEC tournament, I think they win this one pretty handily.
And you think you could say the same for Nebraska and Troy?
Yeah, we said this on the Nutshell podcast, Joe. I was really like when it looked like Nebraska was going to be a 4, when Hawaii was going to be a 13. If they had matched up, I really would have put up the alarm bells. But Troy, like, they probably got this last 13 seed because of the commissioner being on the committee, and they lost a number of players from last year's team that was not that was better than this year's, and that team last year was a 14 for Troy. So I think Nebraska and Vanderbilt do move on to the round of 32 with some ease, and like we said before, Joe, Nebraska gets that elusive first tournament win in program history, and that
Nope.
and
Sean,
it'll set up an interesting round of 32 matchup.
yeah, Sean. I don't think we'll go as too into the round of 32
Yeah.
matchups. I think we'll have time to do that. Hopefully on a Friday night here. Should be good to go for that. So everyone hopefully can tune into that. Real quick, Sean, let's just get this one over with because we were talking about it yesterday. Illinois and Penn, Fran McCaffrey versus Brad Underwood, round whatever. They've faced each other a lot. Illinois fans, no stranger to McCaffrey ball. Sean, I think a lot of people are picking this as the common 3-14 upset along with Michigan State, but I just don't see it, and neither do you. Can you explain why?
Yeah, this team is in typical, not typical Fran McCaffrey fashion. They're actually not good at offense. They're 210th, and they're 104 in defense. And in their games against power conference, or let's call it good opposition, because there's a couple of games in here. They gave up 106 to Providence, 75th ranked team roughly. They gave up 77 to Hofstra, who is um, a 13 seed in another region. They gave up 90 to Villanova. They did lose by one at the Jersey Mike's Arena against Rutgers. That was a close game, but at that point, Rutgers was a little bit different than what we saw in Big Ten play. But for supposed to being better at defense, they didn't perform well defensively against any of these teams that are not as good as Illinois. So I think this is a total, annihilation zone here for the Illini. I think they could win by 30 or more.
Gotcha. Sean, going up, another common upset pick. We have VCU over UNC. A lot of people do, mainly due to the injury of Caleb Wilson, is my suspicion. But what's your take on this game, real quick?
Yeah, that's a big story, Joe. Obviously, Caleb Wilson is not going to be playing in the tournament. He has been out for, let's call it, the last month. He did not play against NC State on February 17th. He has not played since then. They've been okay without him. Like, they beat Louisville at home. They beat Clemson at home. They beat Virginia Tech at home. They went on the road to beat Syracuse. They did lose to Clemson in the tournament by one, but that, when it comes to upsets, Joe, I do think you have to look at the higher seeds' inability to be consistent as one of the main reasons to pick the underdog, because for an upset to happen, look, the underdog's got to make shots. There's no real way to know that that's coming. UNC fell to a 6 because of the injury, and then you go over to VCU, Joe, the Atlantic 10 tournament champions. They did not have to beat St. Louis, and the 2 seed, and it turns out like the fourth and fifth teams in the tournament were way better than the 3 seed, so they didn't really have to play anybody good really all tournament. They didn't play a team in the top 80, but there is a little bit of a profile here to be worried about for North Carolina. VCU is they've changed coaches so many times over the years. Joe, whether it's Shaka Smart or Will Wade or Ryan Odom, now it's Phil Martelli Jr. It's very much the same product. They have a great stable program there. They have athletes in there, and they had a little bit of a tough start. They lost to Vandy by 15 in uh, Bahamas. I think that's where that tournament was, and they've lost one game since January 10th. So they're playing really good ball right now. They've gotten a little bit better defensively. So when you think about North Carolina, when they've had issues this year, they haven't been able to score it at a great rate, and they don't have the safety valve to give it to at the end of the shot clock. So I think this is pretty close to a 50-50 coin flip, maybe 55-45 towards North Carolina, but can totally understand why people would be picking VCU to pick the upset, and I certainly will in a few of my brackets.
Absolutely. Sean, real quick, let's try to make these relatively speedy. We got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
I don't see Houston and Idaho being worth talking about. Maybe that's a freezing cold take that ends up on the internet. If so, oh well. St. Mary's, Texas A&M. What's your quick take here?
Big time disparity in tempo. You've got the 290th ranked tempo for St. Mary's, and Mike and I were joking that that's the fastest that Randy Bennett has ever played, and it's pretty significant. Usually they're not in the top 330, and then Bucky Ball at Texas A&M is in the top 20. So who can dictate the pace of this game will win it. And teams that have not seen St. Mary's have done so, or have not done so against the Gales in the tournament. So I'm going to go with St. Mary's.
Sounds good to me, Sean. That wraps it up for our Southern region. We will certainly go into the round of 32 matchups, and I bet we will pick at least one wrong winner in each bracket. So don't want to preview games that might never happen. But Sean, let's get to this East region here.